Hey everyone, Steven here, and today I'm reviewing the 27A1S OLED monitor from Innocn. This is one of the more affordable OLEDs I reviewed, coming in at roughly half the cost compared to other monitors on the market, but the big question here is, will it still deliver the same performance as those other monitors? Like all my reviews, I'll cover the specs, in-panel settings, and my test results first before getting into what I like, potentially don't like, and the gray area before wrapping the video up. With that being said, let's get into the specs. The Innocn 27A1S is a 27-inch 1440p OLED monitor with a 240Hz refresh rate and a 0.03 millisecond gray-to-gray response time. This is a second-gen panel from LG and has a typical brightness of 150 nits in a 100% window and a peak brightness of 450 nits in a 25% window. This has a contrast ratio of 1.5 million to 1. This has true 10-bit color, and this covers 99% of the DCI P3 color gamut. For ports, this has two HDMI 2.0, two DP 1.4, one USB Type-C that can deliver 65 watts of power. This has two USB 3.0 extension ports and a headphone jack. For the Type-C input, you can actually use this as a video input and get the 1440p at 240 Hz. On the base of the monitor, there is a 15-watt wireless charging pad, but it can be a bit tricky finding the exact right spot if your phone has a larger camera pop-out on it, so do keep that in mind. This also means that you'll need to use the regular arm on this because that's where the power pins are at. They're kind of built into it if you want to use the charging base here. If you don't want to use that though, this does have the option for mounting it with a 100mm by 100mm VESA mounting pattern. On the stand, this also has a cable management hook on the back along with a drop-down headphone holder hook. You also have some really cool LED lights lining both sides on the back of this as well. For physical adjustments, this has height, tilt, and swivel. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information on the numbers specifically for those adjustments, but it does seem to be pretty comparable to all of the other monitors that I've reviewed. This has four 5-watt speakers built into it. 2 are on the front, 2 are on the back, totaling 20 watts total for output with this. This also has a built-in array microphone. I'm going to do a sound test for both of those in a little bit, but for the speakers specifically, it won't be so much of a sound test in terms of overall volume because these get incredibly loud. It would just cause distortion with the camera. So I'm going to have to adjust the gain a little bit in post just to make sure that that doesn't happen. So here it really is more about the sound quality that you can get out of the speakers versus how loud that they get. Inside of the box, you will get the monitor, stand, base, DP cable, HDMI cable, USB Type-C cable, USB-B cable, power adapter, power cable, user manual, and color calibration report, which I always like to see. Last two things here, this only comes with a 12-month warranty, not a 3-year like you may find on other OLED panels, and the price tag here is typically $549 on Amazon, but you can find a discount code or a sale on this somewhat frequently, so you may find this as low as $500. Next, let's do the sound test for the speakers and for the built-in array microphone before getting into the panel menu and the various settings that you will find there. This is a sound test for the built-in array microphone on the Innocn OLED monitor. It's okay, you could probably clean this up and make it sound a little bit better if you're using some type of software. Generally speaking though, this is really just going to be okay for doing like online meetings, right? Zoom meetings or something like that. I don't think you would want to play the sound out of the speakers at the same time though, if you were using this microphone, because it most likely is going to lead to horrible distortion, so do keep that in mind. Shifting over to the panel menu, the physical menu button is a single button on the bottom middle of the monitor, and although I usually like single menu buttons, this one has different inputs that I'm not used to, and I'm not a big fan here. The main reason for that is if you click this in, that is power. And so I find myself clicking this in to try to bring up the menu, like most other monitors that I've reviewed, that's the way that works. Here, it powers it off, which has led to quite a bit of frustration when trying to use this menu because I find myself just constantly clicking this in because that's just how every monitor I've reviewed has been historically. This is the only one that is different. So here, you actually have to click it in a direction. Now you have the main menu, which is going to be towards the right. So if you just simply click it over there, like pull it that direction, it will bring that up. If you push it away from you, then it's going to bring up the picture modes that you can choose from. If you push it to the left, it'll bring up the input quick options. And then if you actually kind of push it or pull it towards you, it's going to bring up the crosshair. With that being said though, if you do bring up the full menu, you have the following tabs: gaming, picture, color, picture and picture / picture by picture, the OSD, and other. Now the layout within these tabs is a bit odd, but I'm slightly more used to it, having used a handful of Innocn monitors before. In the gaming tab, you have 4 picture preset modes. So here you have standard, RTS/RPG, FPS Arena, and MOBA. After that, you have adaptive sync, shadow balance, refresh rate, game crosshair, game time, dynamic brightness, HDR, and HDR has 2 modes, HDR standard and HDR movie. Here basically the standard is a warm color temperature, while the movie is a cool color temperature. And then last, you're going to have the ambient lighting to control the lights on the back. The refresh rate here is very large, and you can change the location to any of the 4 corners of the screen, but you can't change the size or only show the number. So this is actually paired with a line graph with it, so it just takes up a lot of screen real estate on this, so I don't know how usable it is. After this, you have the picture tab, which has brightness, brightness mode, contrast, contextual model, low blue light, sharpness, gamma, and aspect ratio. Brightness mode has 3 settings: normal, highlight, and equilibrium. I'm not going to showcase these on camera, it's not going to come across very well with this, but I am using the highlight mode for all the footage in this video. For contextual model, you have movie, reading, night, care eyes, sRGB, and DCI P3. These modes override the game setting picture presets, so keep that in mind. And this is what I'm referring to when I say that the layout is a little bit different, because instead of actually just having any of the picture-based presets in one area, they've split them into these 2 various tabs, so it makes it a little bit more confusing and a little bit more work to try to compare all of them side by side and then pick the one that fits you best. After this though, you have the color tab, which has all of the color temperature options. Here you have warm, natural, cool, and then 3 user presets which allow you to adjust the RGB colors. On the color tab, you will also have hue and saturation that you can adjust. Next, you have the picture-in-picture / picture-by-picture tab, which has mode, sub-signal source, audio source, position, size, and window swap. For the picture-in-picture mode specifically, you can change the location to be any of the 4 corners of the monitor, and then for size, you have small, medium, and large. After this, you have the OSD settings, which I won't cover, and then last is the other settings tab, which has input signal, mute, volume, auto power, eye shield reminder, USB switch, USB power, reset, information, DSC, and screen saver. The only one here I want to cover is the screen saver, which has 3 times to it, 3, 5, and 10 minutes. So with this, it's going to turn the panel black, essentially powered off, if you've left it on and done nothing for 3, 5, or 10 minutes to hopefully prevent burn-in. Unfortunately though, that's the only OLED Care type option that I can find in the menu. So no pixel clean at the bare minimum, which means a potentially higher risk for burn-in with this panel. Shifting over now to my test results, here I'm using the on-screen response time testing tool. Overall, this is incredible performance. This is an OLED, very similar performance to all the OLEDs that I've tested with this tool. So looking at perceived response time, very fast. Is it the 0.03 milliseconds? Not from what I'm getting, but none of the OLEDs that I've tested have been that. They've all been somewhere around 1 to 2 milliseconds, maybe slightly under 1 millisecond, but again, none of them have been 0.03. And in all of my reviews, I point out the fact that I'm using my testing tool. I'm not using what the company is using to test these out, which is most likely far superior to what I actually have. So keep that in mind, but I am trying to still showcase the results from a testing tool. So here, incredibly fast. This is actually the fastest 0.2550, so the black, white, black transition time that I've had so far on any monitor that I've tested, so very fast here. But again, that's to be expected with an OLED because they're just incredibly fast. When we're looking at RGB overshoot here, this would show up as inverse ghosting. We basically don't have any. You have a couple numbers on there, but it's not anything that would transition to something that you would visually see on screen. Again, showing up as inverse ghosting if you were running the UFO test. The visual response rating here is taking the perceived response time, the RGB overshoot, and then it's averaging those things and then rating it. This is basically an A+ here. So very high markings, very comparable to every OLED that I've run this test with. So in summary, you're going to have a very clear picture here with no ghosting, no inverse ghosting, just a super fast response time. And especially if you can hit the 240 Hertz, it will be incredibly smooth. Shifting over now to the results from the SpiderX color calibration tool, here we are looking at color gamuts. Now they're claiming 99% coverage of the DCI-P3. I did not hit that with any of the various modes that I tested. So here I tested the standard, sRGB, and DCI-P3. Starting with the standard though, we have 100% coverage of the sRGB, 91% of the Adobe RGB, 96% of the DCI-P3, and then 89% of the NTSC. This had the best results out of the 3 that I tested. I did not test every single picture preset and essentially what they call the contextual models here. For the sRGB, we have 97% coverage of the sRGB, 73% of the Adobe RGB, 73% of the DCI-P3, and then 69% of the NTSC. These will be with 100% brightness, by the way, as that gives you the best results when it comes to this test. And then looking at the DCI-P3, we have 100% coverage of the sRGB, 88% of the Adobe RGB, 95% of the DCI-P3, and then 86% of the NTSC. So although I'm not hitting the 99% DCI-P3 here, I am hopefully able to give you some more results in terms of color gamuts, especially when we're looking at this standard here. We are hitting 100% of the sRGB here, and then we have their other ones as well, Adobe RGB and NTSC. So again, I'm not getting the 99% of the DCI-P3 here, but overall, still a really good result for the color gamuts, especially if you are using that standard preset here. And this does get incredibly vibrant if you are going to do some subtle adjustments to this. By default, it looks okay. A lot of these modes aren't going to look the best, but you can get them to a really good point if you spend a little bit of time adjusting the in-panel settings. Shifting over now to a new segment that I'll be adding to videos, which is consoles and what they're capable of. Now, I usually talk about that in the good section, but I actually wanted to just dedicate a section to this now. So here we have 1440p 120 Hz. This does not support for the PlayStation 5 variable refresh rate, but you do get the auto low latency mode with this. So here you don't get upscaling to 4K, but again, you do get 1440p, 120 Hz with the auto low latency mode, no variable refresh rate here. And for 120 Hz, right now it's saying it's in 60 Hz. That will only be applied if you change that within the game that you're using. Shifting over now to the Xbox Series X, we get 1440p, 120 Hz. In terms of the 4K details, it's only going to say that, hey, you get 1440p, 120 Hz. The rest of this, it's all 4K, so it doesn't apply here. It does say that, hey, this doesn't have HDR10 or HDR, but that is in regards to 4K, not 1440p. Here you can see it allows for HDR10. It has auto HDR. We do have the auto low latency mode. On this one though, we do have variable refresh rate for the Xbox Series X, but we don't have it for the PlayStation 5. Not quite sure why there. You're not going to get Dolby Vision with this because that's really just a proprietary HDR kind of calibration that Dolby has. And here just confirming that this does have 10 bits. So you do get true 10-bit HDR on the Xbox Series X. Shifting over now to what I like about this monitor, let's start with the panel because this is the Gen 2 OLED panel from LG. This is going to have all the upside that you find with OLEDs here. So you get the great visuals, you get the really fast response time, you're getting the infinite black levels, you're getting solid HDR, you get the high refresh rate with this one, the 240 Hz. And this is all coming in at a lower price tag compared to other OLEDs that are on the market. The only one that I can see that is comparable, I reviewed an OLED from KTC that is, I believe, the exact same panel here. It's just their features, their molding, but it should be the LG Gen 2 there. So price-wise, these two things are very similar. They may be a little bit different depending on when you're looking at it, but I do see them hit the same price mark pretty frequently. But looking at this, again, if I'm comparing it to larger brands, this thing is a fraction of the cost of those. So a lot of times you may find an OLED like this could be upwards of $1,000. This one here, if you find a good sale for it, you can find this towards $550. So almost exactly half price with this. And so if you've been on the fence about an OLED and part of that is because of the cost, this may be a monitor to consider where you can get it at a much cheaper price point. Now I'll be showcasing various gameplay footage here and I'll be labeling which is SDR, if it's HDR, if it's on a console or not, just to give a good variety of different gameplay footage so you can kind of, in a very general sense, pick up on the performance and the visuals here. Just keep in mind this obviously will look much better in person. Next, this does have really good speakers on it. We have the two in the front, the two in the back. You get the 20 watts total. They sound really good, but you don't get any adjustments in the panel menu. So if you're wanting to increase the bass, for example, because this does lean a little bit more towards having increased treble, you're going to have to do that via Windows or any adjustments through software that you may use. Next, this has the wireless charging pad. I like that. I'm going to talk about it again here in a little bit. It does depend on whether or not your phone really fits to this and it can charge it without being in this very specific spot. I have the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the camera bump out on that is pretty large, so it has a harder time finding that exact spot. But if you don't have that issue, this is going to be a nice feature where you can just set your phone there, get some charging out of it as you're gaming, consuming content, or doing a little bit of work. Last here, the 65 watt charging for the USB TypeC port that can also be used as a display input is really nice because a lot of monitors that I've reviewed, it may be able to use the TypeC input for display, but if it doesn't charge the device, you're going to have to figure out another way to charge that, which may mean more cables. Here you're covered. So if you're plugging your laptop into this, you don't have to worry about, hey, I need a power source also. If you're using a handheld with this, same thing. You'll actually get power to that device as you're using it with the monitor. Shifting over now to what I don't like about this monitor, it's going to be more to do with the molding, the panel, the menu, the things that Innocn has built around the LG panel, because the panel itself, like the OLED panel, is really good because you're getting all that upside that I mentioned earlier the great visuals, fast response time, infinite black levels, really good HDR that just OLEDs come with. And so when you're looking at the panel itself, think of that as just this separate thing because LG made it. Now let's look at the things that Innocn has added to this, their calibrations, things like that. And so I'm going to start with the menu button. Not a fan of the layout because it's led to a lot of frustration with me clicking it in on accident and it powers off the monitor. So then you have to wait, you have to power it back on just to get access to the menu. So a different layout here would have been really appreciated. And there's certain things with it that I just think are an odd choice. And I don't know if there is a workaround. I've not had the same issue with other panels with the menu, like using the picture-in-picture mode. As you cycle through that and you're saying, hey, I want to change the size or I want to change the location on the screen, it like resets everything in the menu, meaning it like backtracks and exits out of the menu instead of just leaving it up there if you wanted to make another adjustment. So let's say I want to move it to one location, but I'm not quite sure I want it there. If you switch it and you're just like, hey, I want to test that out, it literally exits out of everything. And then you have to recycle through the menu just to get back to shift it over. So as you're playing with this, stuff like that just kind of builds to frustration with it, where it should be much easier and user friendly. Here we're also finding a lack of adjustments that you may find with other OLED panels. And I mean that in regards to the adjustments to the picture itself. So the difference in the presets, the difference in what you can adjust for HDR, the brightness, all those different adjustments here. And it's not that it doesn't have any, it just compared to other OLEDs, you're not finding as many adjustments in this. I think for most people it will be fine. But if you're coming from a monitor that just has a lot of things that you can adjust in it, this may feel like you're taking a step backwards. And my best example of that is more specific to HDR, as you just have standard and movie for the HDR settings. It's literally just a warm and cool color temperature. That's the difference between those two things. That's it. And then you don't get any of the other adjustments like brightness and contrast and things like that. It's just you have those two options. You're going to have to do the rest of the adjustments in your NVIDIA or AMD control panel for PC, or if you're using a console, you're going to have to adjust the HDR settings within that a lot more in order to get this to your liking. Next, we're not really getting any OLED Care features here outside of a screensaver mode. So no pixel clean, at least at the bare minimum, a pixel clean. So we don't have that. You don't have some of the other features that you may find on the Gen 2s, like the logo brightness, where it will actually dim any static type logo on screen just to limit the type of long-term exposure to that area that it may have, because that is a static image. Just certain things like that. You're just not getting anything here, just really the screensaver mode. Now if it had the pixel clean, again at the bare minimum, I'd be more okay with it, because the trade-off here is you're getting a much cheaper OLED. But of course with the OLED, everybody's concern is at some point you will get burn-in. And so if we don't have those modes here, you're essentially getting to burn-in quicker. And pair that with the fact that this only comes with a 12-month warranty, not a 3-year warranty like a lot of other companies offer. This only has a 1-year warranty. So the pairing there, I think that is the big trade-off. Like, we're looking at a much more affordable OLED monitor, but that price difference comes with a sacrifice here. And that is with the OLED Care features and the much shorter warranty. So if you are very worried about burn-in, again, it happens at some point. With most of these, I really think if you're doing kind of your due diligence when it comes to owning one of these, like don't leave it on all the time. For the taskbar, make sure that it actually drops down and goes away. It's not just static there the whole time. Put your monitor to sleep or shut it off if you're not going to be there. Like, those subtle things help a ton with these. I think for most people, if you're going to get burn-in, it won't be till close to year 5. in general, if you're just doing the normal stuff like that. So the extra OLED Care features, I think, extend that, where one, it is far more likely that you're not going to get burn-in within that 5-year period, like really, really high percentage that's not going to happen. And then also beyond that, maybe you can take that like 5 to 10 years without any burn-in more realistically. That also is dependent upon what they're putting in here in terms of like heat sinks, if they have the, is it the graphite or graphene based like backing to this, so it will dissipate that heat a little bit more. I don't know, they don't have any information on if they have those features with this either. So ultimately, I would say weigh the pros and cons of this missing the OLED Care features outside of the screensaver mode, along with this only having the 1-year warranty compared to the 3 years that you find with a lot of other major brands. But those other major brands coming in at almost double the cost. Shifting over now to the gray area, these are going to be things that you may or may not care about. I'm going to go back to the wireless phone charger and the fact that if you do have a larger phone with the larger cutouts for the camera, it may not charge very well on this. So you have two things that may happen. One, it may be much harder to find the area where this will line up exactly and you will get a charge from it. Or if you do, it may frequently connect and disconnect just because it's not making really good contact with that wireless charger. And last, I am going to give a small little sample of how the plastic sounds when you move the monitor, more specifically when you swivel the monitor. It's very creaky. It just makes a lot of noise. Now, if you don't adjust the monitor often, that's not a problem, but if you find that you do, this may get on your nerves. Last, I did want to cover a question that I know I'm going to get, which is how does the text clarity look on this thing? It being a Gen 2 panel, it has the older subpixel layout, which is more prone to text fringing here, which you can see because of the 1440p resolution compared to 4K, for instance. So the pixel density is much lower on this compared to the 4K monitors that you may find at the same size. Here, if you run ClearType, it can clean it up a little bit. I don't think it looks horrible. So if you deal in a lot of text-based programs or anything like that, you may notice it. I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker for you. Run the ClearType, increase font size a little bit will take care of a decent portion of that, but just keep in mind it will be there across the board for smaller text where you will notice some of that text fringing. So that is going to wrap this video up. You have one of the most affordable OLEDs on the market, a really good LG Gen 2 panel, 1440p, 240Hz with an ultra fast response time, but you also have some issues here with a lack of OLED Care features and the 1-year warranty on this compared to the 3 years that you get with a lot of other OLED panels. You also have some missing adjustments for the panel menu and the frustration that the menu button comes with. But if you're willing to look past all of that, again, you can get yourself an OLED panel for a fraction of the cost compared to other OLEDs that are on the market. So that's going to wrap this video up. If you want to pick this up for yourself, I will have a link for this in the description, so you can grab that. Definitely look for sales, because you can find this for $500 to $550 pretty frequently. Also, if you have any questions about this, let me know in the comment section. I will make sure to answer those for you there. And if you like the video, hit the like button for me as it helps the channel out. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.